Welcome to the Dead Arm Dynasty podcast, where we try to give a refreshingly candid take on the long-term fantasy value of football players throughout college and the NFL for all you Devy League, Campus to Canton, and Dynasty fantasy football managers. We're just three friends who spend all our time talking fantasy anyway, so we figured why not get a few mics and capture our conversations. My name's Rick, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Josh Pecoraro and Jacob Ellis, a.k.a. Jealous. Welcome back to the show. It's Dirty Rick and the boys back again with some more of that fantasy goodness. Today we'll be diving into some busts and sleepers, but before we do, let's check in with the boys here. Josh, how you doing today?
Doing great. It's almost, for those of you listening, I hope you had a happy 4th of July. We're pre-recording before the 4th of July holiday, so we get some time off here to spend with our family. So looking forward to that. Just got done with my work week, a day early, so looking forward to hitting the lake tomorrow. Having a couple beverages tonight to celebrate and ease into the week.
Do a little prep for the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of beverages you got?
Well, the first one that I polished off pre-recording to get my beer voice going.
Get the juices flowing.
Juices flowing, yeah. It's got a Three Sheeps Fresh Coast IPA.
Yum.
Pretty solid. We Beyonce and I were camping last weekend, so I ran out of beer as usual the second night in, so I had to go to the liquor store and... Up there, it was kind of slim pickings in the North Woods, so I grabbed a Three Sheeps variety pack. So the next one I'm going for is called Chaos Pattern, a hazy IPA, and it is fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm jealous of that.
That sounds phenomenal.
It's been a hazy summer for me in more ways than one, but it's love those hazy IPAs.
A little hazed and confused?
Maybe.
You're just full of them today.
Oh, yeah. Joe, how you doing?
Thanks for the handout there, Dirty Rick. Good to hear that.
I went with that name because I haven't showered in 2 days.
Oh, boy.
Yikes.
I'm
Glad we are
Kira
all remote right
that.
now.
So that's
Work from
going
home
to
life.
transition perfectly into some pretty big news for our host. That guy's getting married next weekend. I don't know how much his wife is going to like that if he's just going to not shower. But
I'll shower once I'm living with her.
Yeah, I hope so, for her sake.
Yeah.
I'm still working on that iced tea Truly pack that I was drinking last week. I am on the raspberry flavor, and it is not very good. So
yeah, it sounds like what it
raspberry
tastes
tea. Like. I don't know. I don't like raspberry things. I guess raspberry vodka's not.
That's
for
probably
me.
why
Raspberry
you don't like
tea.
it. Right.
So, still working on this, but unfortunately on the 4th of the 4 flavors.
Well, that is good to know that you're almost at the end. I have something else that I'm sipping on today.
We've been watching you struggle through that.
Well, so I ran out of my Michelobes from the golf outing. So the only alcohol that I had in my apartment was some Costco rum. So what I decided
you still
to
have
do,
that?
I do. So what I did here was pour a shitload of frozen blueberries into a glass and then just pour rum on top of it.
What?
So far, the blueberries have not really emitted any of their flavor, so it mostly just tastes like rum right now.
Are you trying to make like WAP in a glass? Is that what?
Well, I just wanted it to turn into like a blueberry rum, and then I could eat the blueberries at the end. But so far, it just tastes like rum.
Usually, it takes like hours.
Yeah, you have to do that like the day in advance.
Well, whoops. So I came up with 2 names for this drink. The first would be a pirate without scurvy, because the fruit keeps me from getting scurvy. And the second would be a mistake. So we're going to see how that goes.
I'm going to go with the mistake.
Oh, I'm positive that is an accurate name for this. Let's jump into some fantasy football talk here.
I have an announcement for our listeners as well. Thanks to DJ Jelly Gel, for those of you listening on Spotify or Anchor, we are now on Apple Podcasts. So subscribe on Apple. Wanted to get that message out right away because I know that's my favorite listening platform to use. So you can subscribe on there, and our podcast will jump in there every time it's released.
Yep, that's the same with me. That's the only place I listen to pods. So when we got that news, that was incredibly exciting, and that's only going to help us reach more people. And we'll turn this into a dynasty of a show.
Ho, ho, ho.
Yeah.
And thank you for that announcement, because it bought me time to take a sip and then cringe for 30 seconds afterwards. So I will be taking advantage of those moments throughout the show. For now, just like
quick,
this,
right? Just while I've got my mind on this, thank you, Josh, again for that plug. Also, just an additional plug: Dead Arm Sports, Twitter and Instagram, #DAS. Just had to get that out there as well.
Okay. Well, given that...
Wait, I have one... Just kidding.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Given this is going to be such a good segue, given that my attempted mixed drink was a total bust, let's jump right into the busts that we have picked for this coming fantasy season, and also, maybe some dynasty concerns out of these players, these backfields, these wide receiver cores, whatever it might be. We have not shared these with each other in advance, so this will be fun to react live here. Jealous, why don't we start with you? Hit us up with a bust. Who's not going to perform the way that their hype or ADP is projecting?
My top bust, just especially going off of ADP, what I saw last year, and some of the off-season changes that the Steelers have made. Diontae Johnson, I'm not a fan. I think that everybody knows Chase Claypool is the very clear number one receiver on that team. Big Ben, last year, he could barely throw the ball more than 8 yards downfield, and they had no running game. So Diontae Johnson did get quite a few targets, did get quite a few catches, on some of these shorter patterns. But it's just, Chase is going to have he's going to have one more year. Ben I don't think he's going to be gaining arm strength as he gets closer to 40. And the biggest reason is that they've got Najee. They just drafted Najee. They're going to use him. Oh, God, Rick. I just saw his face in the Zoom. That was brutal.
You're going to have to get used to it.
But, yeah, the addition of Najee Harris into that backfield, they're not going to be throwing the ball as much, especially in some of these shorter spaces where Diontae was used last year. So, and again, they get Juju Smith-Schuster. He came back.
He's going to be Big Ben's favorite target 8 yards down the field.
Exactly. So where does Diontae Johnson exactly fit? Claypool's the most talented receiver on that team. Juju's going to do what he does, get a lot of receptions. That puts Johnson as that third receiver with less playing time with the return or with the addition of Najee. He's being drafted right now around that Brandon Ayuk, Kyle Pitts, Josh Allen, Cortland Sutton area, kind of in the mid-40s. I personally have him below Claypool, and I have him below Chris Carson as well, who Carson right now is being drafted in the 60s. I would have Johnson below Chris Carson, below Claypool, and right now he's being drafted and ranked above those two players.
Josh, you got any initial thoughts there?
I don't agree with that. So we've got some fireworks right out of the gate.
Yeah.
I like Diontae Johnson, actually, and Chase Claypool. I think they're going to be Big Ben's top two targets this year. He favored them last year. He saw a little bit of a slide from Juju, and Juju was actually on my bust list. So I'm glad you brought him up. We both agree that there's going to be a Steelers wide receiver that's a bust. However, I have that as Juju. They brought him back on just a one-year deal just to bring him back. He signed because the wide receiver market was just garbage this year. I agree with your takes on Big Ben. He's going to be not having as much arm strength again this year. He's at probably the last year of his career. But I like Diontae Johnson plugging into that lineup, even with Najee Harris there. I think they're going to turn it over to the young guns again, kind of how we saw in history earlier on with when Hines Ward kind of got phased out a little bit to the offense. Antonio Brown took that step up as the young guy, bringing up their offense. So I agree to disagree on that. I do agree with you that it's a Steelers wide receiver to not draft, but I think that wide receiver to not draft is Juju.
I feel you both on this. I get where you're coming from.
Pick a side.
I might at the end of this. Let me just talk through my thoughts and maybe I'll land on a side here. I agree that Claypool is the most talented receiver in that core, and I think that if not this year, then next year he will be for sure the number one on the Steelers wide receiver group. And then Juju, He's going to be all right again. He's going to get a lot of short targets. He's going to rack up receptions, and it's not going to turn into that many yards. But he will be used by Big Ben, who has a better rapport with him than the other two. So yeah, it's mostly a question to me of how much does Ben have left. This is not a hindrance of Deontay Johnson's dynasty value, because Ben will probably only be around for this season, and then after that, it's a fresh arm coming in there who can start throwing deep balls again. I'm not concerned about Deontay Johnson in a dynasty format, but in redraft, I doubt that he's going to end up on any of my teams. So I guess in that sense, I have to side with Jealous for now.
I guess I still just, even in dynasty, I'm still not a huge Deontay. I'm not going to be a big Deontay Johnson guy.
So even when a year from now Juju's not on the Steelers anymore and they just have their big 1-2 receiver combo and a fresh quarterback to throw him the ball, you don't want to.
Who's that quarterback going to be? Dwayne Haskins is the only one on that roster right now.
Well, I'm assuming they're going to draft one next year.
We'll see.
If they don't, then I have no idea what their plan is, and I don't want any part of that wide receiver core.
I mean, I also just go back to the Najee piece, and he's going to be there obviously for the long haul. So
yeah,
I would also say I wouldn't really want much to do with Juju either. So I guess, basically put that whole Steelers wide receiver room onto the bus, into that bust area if you want. But the one specifically that I think is going to fall off and that's being drafted a bit too high is Deontay.
Let's use that as a segue to Josh talking about Juju as a bust. What do you think?
I mean, I don't see it. I mean, like you guys are saying that, Big Ben likes to throw to Juju those 8 yards. Well, that's where Najee's going to come in too. He's going to be running out of the backfield, catching those short yard passages and trying to do some. Rick, your face is just, for those listening, Eric is just struggling to drink his drink right now, and it is hilarious over Zoom. But no, I think that's where Najee's going to come in and take away some of those short yard passes from Big Ben. I think he's the one, Juju's going to be the one that takes the biggest hit with this. They brought, like I said, they're not tied to him after this year. Big Ben's got his rapport with him, but Big Ben had some rapport with Claypool last year and Deontay as well. So, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I feel you there. And on a redraft basis, I definitely agree. Juju is not someone that I want at all. In Dynasty, as a Juju owner, I'm still hopeful that after this year, when he is no longer a Steeler and signed somewhere else, that maybe he can have a quarterback who can better utilize his talents. That's me being hopeful because I want to win. Do I know for sure that's going to happen? Absolutely not. So I guess my question is, Josh, do you see him as a dynasty bust as well, or is this more a redraft bust?
I am not touching him really for dynasty purposes either, just because it scares me not knowing where he's going to end up next year. I mean, sure. I think this year, based on my redraft perspective from it, I'm not touching him because I don't like him in Pittsburgh right now. And if I don't want him this year in redraft, I'm not going to draft him in dynasty this year and have him just kind of sit on my bench hoping that he gets to a good landing spot next year. I'm not in on Juju.
Sure. Yep, that's fair. And I can agree with pretty much everything you said. Not that this is the same situation, but kind of similar. Was last year in the middle of the season, I picked up Curtis Samuel off the waiver wire, knowing that it was going to be his last year in Carolina, just crossing my fingers that it might work out well. And in my case, it did. He went to Washington, and I think that's going to be great for Curtis Samuel. Not that those two players are the same, but they have kind of similar play styles. Just thinking out loud for people who are making that decision whether to stash a guy for a while. It can pay off, but it's a risk for sure.
Absolutely.
In that case, I will jump into my first bust pick, which is every running back in Tampa Bay, which now includes Leonard Fournette, Ronald Jones, Gio Bernard, and Keyshawn Vaughn. This is a team built for winning Super Bowls, not for consistent fantasy production. And when Tom Brady is at the quarterback position and he's going to sort of handpick exactly how this offense is going to work all season, I would expect not anything different than what we saw in New England for so long, which is that you can't really rely on one running back very much, very, very often. In no single week are you going to know who to play unless the other guys are all hurt. Gio is going to get his passing work. Keyshawn Vaughn's going to get a few touches here and there, and then Fournette and Rojo are going to split the actual ground pound, run game carries. And I think that the result is that none of them are going to be very useful. None of them are going to have a ton of touchdowns. Brady's going to be throwing plenty to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin in the end zone. There's a 0% chance that I will have any Tampa Bay running back on any team in Dynasty or redraft. There's just no way that I can justify that.
Yeah, I mean, we saw last year with once Fournette joined that, once he was signed by the Bucs, it basically made both him and Rojo pretty much, somewhat useless. Because of exactly what you just said, splitting time, and then the addition of Gio Bernard to that backfield. He's going to get a lot of those. He's going to get passing touches. They didn't really have a receiving back, or not much for one last year. We know how much Brady likes to use Bernard, or likes to use his receiving running backs, the James Whites of the world. So Gio Bernard's going to get playing time for that. That's just going to take away from Fournette, from Ronald Jones. And then, like you said, throw in Keyshawn Vaughn in there too. His college tape didn't really do much for me, Keyshawn Vaughn, but obviously, Tampa saw something in him. So you've got 4 backs back there. I wouldn't be shocked if one of them, who knows what Fournette's situation's going to be. In terms of, I think he's just on another 1-year deal.
Right.
So they're obviously not too committed to him. And then same thing, dynasty-wise, Fournette would be, he doesn't produce in the running or in the passing game. Rojo's never been spectacular. Bernard's 29, I believe.
That sounds right.
As in a dynasty format as well, I'm not too high on any of those guys.
Yeah, I really don't have much more to add. I honestly can't remember the last time I owned or had a Tampa Bay Bunny running back in my
Tampa Bay Bunny. Is that what I just heard there?
Tampa Bay Bunny backs. Yep.
I think
that's pretty much what I'm viewing them as. I'm not having them on any of my teams either. So
you were thinking about the muscle hamster Doug Martin and when he used to tear you a new one 10 years ago.
Oh yeah. Yep.
I remember those days all too well.
But no, I agree with your take, Al. Bernard's going to take a lot of the passing down work, which really limits the 2 starters in Fournette and Ronald Jones. We've seen committees work for fantasy, aka the San Francisco 49ers. If you can pick and choose which of those running backs to plug into your lineup and they hit, it's going to be awesome. But I think even if you pick the Tampa Bay running back that is going to be the starter and have the better of the game, it's not a fantasy winning week. It might get you by, but it's
a
not
flex player
great.
at best.
But at the same time, even New England, they would rotate between backs every week. One week it would be James White getting the majority of the touches. The next week it'd be Michel. But that's so. Even if you pick and choose with New England running backs, you don't really have that same luxury with Tampa backs. Seems like they just pretty much are going to get pretty equal playing time, rendering them all somewhat useless.
Yeah, and they're going to be you're going to have to pick which one's going to get a touchdown. That's the only way you're going to survive if you have one of the Tampa running backs, is they're going to be touchdown dependent.
Yep, it's a perfectly fine strategy for trying to win a Super Bowl, and it sucks ass for us trying to win fantasy football championships. Let's move on. Jell, you're up next. Hit me with another bust on your list.
I go back to, so I almost jumped in and wanted to jump in when you mentioned Curtis Samuel leaving the Panthers and how you looked at that as a plus. I'm going to pick another Panther that I think is going to be a bust this year, and that's DJ Moore.
Interesting.
Just attacking my dynasty team.
Wow.
You got Christian McCaffrey obviously coming back. He's going to get, he's getting paid a ton of money. They're going to use the hell out of him, and he's going to have fresh legs, assuming he can stay healthy. They're gonna ride him hard. They still got Robbie Anderson, so there's still other mouths to feed out there besides McCaffrey. And they did also just add Chuba and Terrace Marshall in the draft. I mean, Marshall's gonna get targets. Chuba probably won't be much of a factor in terms of taking away, targets from DJ Moore, but it's just one other mouth to feed. Last thing, as we all know, I think we all view Sam Darnold as an upgrade over Teddy from last year, but there's nothing guaranteed with Darnold. So I'm just not too hot on him. He's being drafted right now in the low 30s. He's around that Chase, Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Allen Robinson. These are all guys that I would value much higher than DJ Moore. I've got Moore probably closer to like the mid 50s. Once you get behind Cortland Sutton, that's Rick's boy.
Yeah.
Josh Jacobs, Javonte Williams. That's more of where I see Moore being, if I wanted him on my team, which obviously I am not high on him, so I don't. But if I were picking him, that's where I would, start to consider drafting him there in kind of that like 50, 55, 60 range.
Again, I'm going to strongly disagree with you, Jell. For one of the points that you actually made is that we can all agree that Sam Darnold is an upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater, correct?
Right.
Would you guys agree?
Yeah, it might not be a big one, but yeah.
And Teddy Bridgewater supported 3 wide receivers last year in that offense. Granted, Christian McCaffrey was out, but Teddy Bridgewater is not that great of a quarterback. I think Sam Darnold is going to be able to support 3 wide receivers again. You got Terrace Marshall there. However, rookie wide receiver, it's going to take him a little bit to get acclimated. He's going to start off as that wide receiver 3. Darnold has that rapport with Sam Darnold. However, I still think DJ Moore is a good threat to have in that offense. I think that offense is going to be up and coming now with McCaffrey back, taking off some of the pressure from the passing game. And last year, DJ Moore, he only had 4 touchdowns. I think he'll have more than 4 touchdowns this year, which will make his fantasy points go up even more. He had just shy of 1,200 yards, 4 touchdowns with Teddy Bridgewater throwing him the ball.
Just one correction for the listeners. As much as I know that Darnold does have good rapport with Darnold, I think
I meant Robbie Anderson.
What we meant there was Robbie Anderson. No worries.
My bad.
So that makes me curious. I'm just looking at some ADP stuff here. Who would you guys rather have? And Jealous, I mostly want to hear your takes on this. DJ Moore, Tyler Lockett, Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen.
I would go...
I think Lockett's the only one I would put in front of DJ Moore there. Otherwise, I'd rather have DJ Moore.
I would go Lockett, and I would put Moore basically... we know what Thielen did last year, which he put up 14 touchdowns, so his numbers looked incredible. There's not a chance that he's going to maintain that, especially in Dynasty. I would probably take Moore just because Thielen is getting further up there in age, and he's got Justin Jefferson to compete with on a weekly basis. On redraft, I would put Thielen ahead of Moore right now. And I would say I would take Lockett ahead of Moore. Obviously, you guys know how I feel about Deontay Johnson, so we can ignore him. But I would still go 2 of those 3 guys over DJ.
So what's interesting about that particular group is that based on ADP right now, Tyler Lockett is actually the lowest of those 4.
I know.
Yeah, so that's just interesting that there's that big of a disparity. 5 wide receivers worth between Lockett and Moore, and both of you said you would take DJ Moore over Tyler Lockett. Flip that.
You got
I think Tyler Lockett, though, everybody just kind of got burned by him. He came on so strong last year, and then it was so hit or miss. It was all or nothing with him. Was just nuts. Terrible.
Yeah. We'll see what happens with a new OC out in Seattle.
That wants to run the ball.
Right. Yes. That will come up again later. But any other thoughts on our current bust pick here before we move on? Okay,
I've said my piece.
All right, Josh, you up then? What you got for a bust candidate?
I think this will be one that we can all agree on. I don't have too much to say. I just want to reverberate this again because I feel like this is a player we talk about every single episode. But do not draft Miles Sanders in the 3rd round, please. Just don't do it.
Yep.
You got Jalen Hurts there, which they're going to try and get him to run the ball a lot more, especially inside the 10s, and it's going to take a lot away from Miles Sanders. So he's somebody don't want to take a chance on. And if it does come back to bite me, then so be it. I'd rather take somebody else in the third round that I know isn't going to have a chance to bust for me.
Third round is obviously too high. Way too high. Let somebody else do it if he's going to be taken in the third. Don't let it be you.
Yeah, this is just way too big of a risk. And by risk, I mean that there's almost no chance that Miles Sanders succeeds at returning a third-round value this year and even going forward. The Eagles team isn't going to change in a way that gives Miles Sanders more opportunity in the future. So dynasty-wise, downgrade him just the same as you would redraft. This is not the year or the time for Miles Sanders. There might never be a time for Miles Sanders to totally blow up into a workhorse like we all thought could have happened 2 years ago. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. You guys got any other thoughts on Miles Sanders, or
we've touched on him over the last few episodes. Yeah. I think we pretty much made our thoughts clear.
All right,
yeah. I just wanted to make sure that the listeners knew where we all stand and to avoid Miles Sanders. So if you want more in-depth takes, listen to our prior episodes.
Okay, fair enough. In that case, I really wanted to find a bust candidate that I thought was, a pretty highly ranked player, and I could find a reason that they're not ever going to land on my team, and I landed on Chris Godwin. So I'm back in Tampa Bay here.
You're just hating.
I'm hating because the way that Brady plays football means that fantasy is very unpredictable. Looking at Chris Godwin's stats from 2019 to 2020, going from Jameis Winston to Tom Brady, he went from a little over 8.5 targets per game in 2019 to 7 in 2020. His yards per game dropped from 95 to 70. Looking at Tampa Bay now and looking at how they were last year, there's a lot of mouths to feed. You got Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, but then you got Tyler Johnson. They just drafted another rookie receiver, if I remember right. Help me on the name. I'm forgetting who it is.
Was it Tyler Johnson?
No, he was last year's rookie.
Last year's.
They picked another one.
Oh my gosh, I know who you're talking about too.
Yeah, I can't think of who you're talking about.
We'll figure it out. Point is,
I'll vet it.
But between the collection of running backs that we already touched on and all of these wide receivers, there are way too many mouths to feed. Antonio Brown's still there on another 1-year contract. Their goal is to win. Their goal is not to force feed Mike Evans and Chris Godwin the way that Jameis Winston did.
They still got AB too.
Yep. So
Jalen Darden.
That's the guy, Jalen Darden. There's so many mouths to feed in Tampa Bay, and my concern is that Chris Godwin, despite his talent, I'm not doubting his talent at all, and I don't think from a dynasty perspective I'm all that worried because Brady will not be around that much longer. I don't think so. Redraft especially.
You never know.
But I know. Yeah, he's a vegan, so he could last forever. But as far as redraft is concerned, there's no chance that I'm going to be touching Chris Godwin because I cannot trust what Tampa is going to do on offense ever. They're going to score plenty of points, but it's going to go to everyone at totally unpredictable times. I just want no part of that offense, unless maybe it's Tom Brady. I'm fine with that as your, later round QB, but I struggle to consider Chris Godwin as even meeting his ADP right now for this season. Dynasty, of course, things could change in the future, but because it's unpredictable, I don't want to go that route either, given the ADP you'd have to spend on him.
Yeah, I agree with you completely on that. Tampa Bay's offense is one that I don't feel comfortable having anybody on other than Tom Brady as a late-round quarterback. Like you said, Eric, they're going to be spreading the ball around. You don't know who's going to have the big game. I mean, that even includes Mike Evans. I mean, I love all of their players and receivers personally. Like, not personally, but like each individually. But in that offense, like you had touched on earlier when we were touching on the running backs, they're built to win the Super Bowl and go after Super Bowls, not to help out fantasy at all. The only player on their offense I think I would take a chance on later in a redraft format that I know you were out on, Eric, because of his character is Antonio Brown. Just with how late he's going, you could take a flyer on him, and he could end up being their wide receiver 1, and you could get him in the double-digit rounds of your draft if you don't mind somebody with a not-so-great character off of the field. But that's the only one. You've got a full offseason now with him building up in that offense. He came in the middle of the season last year, played limited amount of games. He's one that maybe I would take a flyer on later on, but yeah, otherwise I'm out on their wide receivers too.
Yeah, I'm looking at right now these ADPs, and Chris Godwin right now is slotted in the early 30s ahead of guys like Allen Robinson, who he's going to have a better QB situation this year, whether it's Dalton, whether it's Fields, and obviously
and he's their number one option forward. Too. He's their number one option.
He'll be force-fed the ball,
no question. And then they've also got Godwin. He's being drafted ahead of Amari Cooper as well. I know people don't love Amari Cooper, but because he is just such a, you don't really know what you're going to get to him possession by possession. There's going to be, he's super flaky. There are times when he just quits on routes or just quits on possessions. I remember last year there was a big third down in the red zone and he wasn't on the field. They just put out their CD and Gallup.
Michael Gallup.
And Cooper should be given his payday, given his 5-year, $100 million contract. He needs to be out on the field, but they don't trust him because he's a flake and he just quits on routes, quits on balls that he doesn't think he can get to, and that's shitty. But
is he a frosted flake?
But he does still put up, pretty steady numbers. I think So I mean, if you had Godwin or Cooper, I think you have to take Cooper. So I'm not completely out on Godwin like you guys seem to be. At least as much, but I think he's being drafted plenty too high.
Well, and for that reason, that's why I'm out. Like, there's just no chance he'll land on my team. I don't. If I already had a team that had Godwin on it, I'm not going to try and trade him now. That would be the wrong time to trade. You don't trade low and buy high. So, if you have Godwin, keep him because, dynasty value is still good for him. He's got a bright future. He's a super talented player. But this year, I'm concerned, and if you're doing a fresh dynasty draft, there's other guys that you can take who will be more consistent now and also have a bright future at the same draft spot. That's
something else to consider with any Bucs receiver. Do you believe in Kyle Trask? Because he's the guy that's in line after Brady.
Reports have said he actually is looking halfway decent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that he's going to be trash, Kyle Trash, as Dirty Rick.
I'll stand by Kyle
real
Trash.
Creative nickname, but just something to consider if you're high on him or not.
Eric, I have a hypothetical for you. Another receiver that we're all very skeptical of this year is also being drafted, relatively similar spot. Would you rather have Chris Godwin on your team or Kenny Golladay?
Ooh, are we talking Dynasty or redraft?
You can give your opinion on both.
Dynasty, give me Chris Godwin all day. And redraft, I will take... Oh,
that's good.
Boy.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's
it's
good,
tough
Josh.
because, they're falling in similar spots, and you're drafting them in a spot you really don't want to. Realistically, I'm probably out on both guys, but if it came down to it, I think I'm Chris Godwin for Dynasty, and I might even be redraft wise too, just with Tom Brady as a quarterback.
I think I'm
really torn on redraft.
That's really good, but I probably have to side with Josh here. I would probably go Godwin in both redraft and obviously for sure in Dynasty. But redraft, it's a bit of a toss up. I would just lean Godwin because I'm pretty much out on Golladay.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess redraft, I'm probably picking Godwin too, just in the hopes that he turns out to be the wide receiver one on the team. But like last year, Mike Evans had 13 touchdowns. He was the red zone guy, and the yards were totally spread out among all of the guys, which meant that Godwin had his worst season in a few years now. So it's got to fall right for Godwin.
Godwin's talent. It's just a matter of share time.
They just have to give him the ball.
Was last year the year that Mike Evans had the game where he had 3 yards but had 2 touchdowns?
He actually had 2 separate games, both of which had 2 yards, one of which had 1 touchdown, the other had 2. Okay. And in those 2 games, he combined for 3 receptions and 3 touchdowns. That was week 1 and 3.
3 yards?
Yes. Yeah, combined 4 yards. 4 yards over 2 games. So Mike Evans had a weird season last year.
That's insane.
I do want to throw out a fun fact about our sponsor, Mike Evans. He has the most consecutive 1,000-yard seasons receiving of any player in history, which is all 7 of his seasons that he's been in the league. So if he does it again, he will just continue crushing that same record over and
I've
over.
still got my jersey, so I'm still holding out hope for him.
Oh, you do have a Mike Evans jersey.
The collar's nice and wrinkled now. Little bacon neck.
That's beautiful. Love.
Gotta love the bacon neck.
A bacon neck on a football jersey is what we all strive to have.
Looks so bad.
Let's move on. You guys got some more buzz candidates you want to touch on? Josh, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I've got a guy going redraft wise in the middle of the 10th round. Just had a bomb season last year. There's no arguing it, but I am completely out on Robert Tonyan. His touchdown regression is going to go way down. You've got the whole issue with, is Aaron Rodgers going to be there? Is he not going to be there? I think the Lazard is going to take a step up, like we had mentioned in our last year talk, and Ellis had brought him up. And I just don't think you're going to see the touchdowns from Tonyan, which is going to have him drop back into that tight end, 10, 11, 12 range, which I don't know. I mean, you can take a shot on him with how late he's being drafted, but he's just somebody that's off my board. I don't want any part of him this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody has the same exact feelings as you do, so I don't know if he's necessarily being overdrafted, but there is no question there is going to be regression, given that he put up insane touchdown numbers, and that's pretty much the only time he's being used. He's not being used in the middle of the field, so I'm agreeing with you there, Josh.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess not as much bust, but he's just somebody that is off my draft board. I'm not going to have him in any of my leagues.
Jell, is there a chance you land Bobby Funyuns on your team at some point this year?
I picked him up off waivers last year. That was phenomenal. But
there you go.
In terms
That's a good
of drafting him, I probably not. I would take him for some tight end depth, but I'm not going to take him with a high pick or anything like that.
Yeah, I think once we get into the sleeper portion, Dirty Rick's going to bring up somebody I'd rather have over him. So
that's fair.
Little spoiler alert for the listeners.
I think that the scenario
I
think that the scenario in which I would end up with Funyuns on my team is if I was, going through my normal strategy, which is to have a very good tight end on my team, and I missed it because I got greedy, and the result is that I have to pick two guys later on and hope that one of the two hits.
Yeah.
That's where I would pick Funyuns as one of my two, and then I'd grab another similar guy like someone we'll talk about later in the sleepers and hope that one of the two hits, because I'm sure that matchup-based, starting lineups, you can plug one of two guys in to fulfill your tight end needs all season long if Tonyan's one of them, and you just happen to have another guy who's pretty good too. That's where I fall. I think we're kind of all on the same page there. Let's roll on to the next one. Jell, you got another bust for us?
I got one more that I'll just touch on real quick. I think that I got Jalen Waddle on somebody that I think I will let somebody else pick. There's, in both Dynasty and redrafts, not that think he's going to be absolute trash, but when I start hearing comparisons to him and Tyreek Hill, I think that's insane. They have that speed, obviously, both of them, but Tyreek Hill his ball skills are insane. The fact that he puts up crazy numbers every week, I just don't see Waddle being able to do that, especially with Tua as his QB. I think that the fact that they played together at Alabama, people are really overvaluing that. That seems to be a topic that comes up over and over again, and I just don't see how that is as valuable as some people are making it out to be. They didn't play together that much, and then once Tua got drafted and Mac Jones took over for Tua, Waddle says after the college football season that Mac was a better quarterback. So I don't think that Tua's going to appreciate that too much. Obviously, he was okay with them drafting him, and I'm sure Waddle was just trying to do Mac a favor to make sure he gets drafted in the first round, but he's going ahead right now. He's going ahead of guys like another guy that we talked about, Tyler Lockett already, going ahead of a running back I really like in Trey Sermon in Dynasty drafts. So I'm not saying that he's going to be absolute trash, but I think he's being overdrafted.
I'd agree with you completely there, Ellis. There's a lot of mouths to feed with that wide receiver core, including the tight end position too. You got Waddle there, you got Will Fuller, you got Devonta Parker, Mike Gesicki there.
Showed that he can be really solid. So
yeah, he was solid last year for the most part. He was somebody you could plug in each week and get some production from. And the biggest key with Waddle is Tua. I mean, what Tua is going to show up this year? We haven't seen him show his Alabama side at all last year. I mean, he was struggling a lot at times. They benched him to go back to Fitzpatrick at times when Tua was named the starter. I mean, you can't trust anybody, especially a rookie wide receiver coming in right now in an offense that the quarterback is unproven.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm curious then, like, when I was looking at busts, I was trying to avoid the guys that every other website and podcast is going to hit on, which is, your Josh Jacobs, DeAndre Swift, Will Fuller being one of them.
Flying
In a redraft, would you rather have Flying V or Jalen Waddle?
Flying V without a doubt.
I disagree.
No,
I would probably rather have Waddle because I don't think Will Fuller's going to play 16 games.
Well,
we already know
that
he
won't.
Because he's already going into the year with a suspension.
And it's a 17-game
schedule.
so
it still could be 16. That's real.
Okay, well, I don't think he's going to play 16 still.
That's fair.
I mean, he's gotten hurt every year. He's plenty talented, but he can't stay on the field. So for that reason, I would rather have Waddle. But
true, but Waddle's coming off of an injury that sidelined him all of his college season last year.
Yeah, true. It's an ankle, though. I mean, that stuff tends to heal, and he did play in the title game and showed that he seemed healthy. The thing with Flying V, it seemed to be hamstrings and quads, that soft tissue shit, and that stuff doesn't really ever go away. So I really struggle to see. I highly doubt he's going to get another. Well, we know it won't be 17 games, but post suspension, I struggle seeing him playing every Sunday, or Monday, or Thursday, or Saturday.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think between the two in a redraft, I want Will Fuller because if I know that he's going into a game healthy, then I feel comfortable that I can flex him if I have to. Whereas because of where I have to draft him, I don't need to rely on him week in, week out, or at least if I do everything right, I won't have to. So that would be my reason in a redraft for Fuller. Otherwise, it's obviously Jalen Waddle. Any other thoughts there before we move on to one last bust here?
What up, my party people? It's your boy Jealous. I got to put in a good word for our friends over at Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the absolute easiest way to record a podcast. Anchor has creation tools that allows you to record and edit right from your phone, your computer, or your tablet. Easy as that. It will also distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many other listening platforms. You can also make money directly through the program with no minimum amount of listeners. And best of all, kids, it's free. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Let's go.
Okay, let's roll. I want to just call out the Patriots passing game. So far, reports out of camp are very average for Mac Jones. We see a mix of he doesn't seem to be as accurate as he was hyped up to be, and some moments where he's, looking great and all that fun stuff, because beat writers like to tell everyone that everything's good sometimes. Even if Mac Jones does start, or obviously Cam, who has had a recent history of not being able to throw very well, I want nobody who is catching passes out of New England. That includes their very highly paid and very talented tight ends in Johnny Smith and Hunter Henry, and that especially means Nelson Aguilar. If I can, I would like to avoid anyone in the Patriots pass catching department, because if Cam starts, there's no chance that any of them are going to live up to the potential that their actual talent reflects. And if Mac Jones starts, it sounds like it's not going to be that much better right now. So I'm totally out on all of those guys at their current ADPs.
Well, I think we can all agree that Mac looks amazing in that number 50 jersey. When I first saw him, it looked like he was supposed to be a ball boy or something. Then I found out, oh shoot, that's their first round pick.
I think he's doing that to confuse the defense. They're like, oh, we already got somebody rushing the quarterback. We can lay off now.
That linebacker's right in the middle of the pocket. Yeah. All right.
No, I mean, but in terms of, having any of those receivers, I would absolutely stay away from the wide receivers. I guess I would consider Jonnu or Hunter Henry over, before I would, consider any Aguilar or any of the other number of guys that they picked up this year in free agency.
Which receiver? I mean, which tight end? Which tight end do you want out of those two?
I would rather have Jonnu. I go back to health as well with Hunter Henry. That's the
fair.
same exact thing that I was talking about with Fuller. I think Henry is a crazy talented receiving tight end, and I think what they're trying to do is build back that Gronk, Aaron Hernandez type of thing. I think that's what Belichick wants to do with less murdering.
Which one's Hernandez out of those two?
That would be, I think that would be Henry.
What?
You never know.
You were so ready with that answer.
Yeah, of course.
No hesitation.
But I would rather have one of their tight ends than any of their wideouts. We did see Cam and Greg Olsen put up a few good years, so I think Cam does like to use that tight end. But again, he's not the same QB obviously that he was in Carolina, especially in his early days. If you just look at his throwing motion after he had his shoulder surgery, which was last year, he had it in the offseason the season before, so last year was his first year after that shoulder surgery, and you could see he can't bring the ball back past his shoulder, so he just doesn't have the same arm, even close to that arm strength that he had in Carolina or at Auburn. I think that's why I would stay away from the wide receivers, why it gives me a little bit more hope that these tight ends could see some more targets, because they're going to be in the middle of the field, they're going to be running shorter patterns, that kind of stuff. But I'm not super high on either of them either. And if Mac Jones is on the field, I'm out on all the rest of their offense.
See, I side with you a little bit, Jealous, but I agree with you with the tight end position. I would take a chance on one of the tight ends. To me, it's a coin flip, whichever one I can get a little bit later as my second tight end in the draft. I am more confident, I think, with Mac Jones behind center than I would be with Cam Newton. And the only reason that I'm going to say that is because of Bill Belichick. He's no spring chicken anymore. As soon as Mac Jones takes over that offense, he's going to want to see what they have in Mac Jones and let him start throwing the ball around. Because he is not going to be coaching a ton longer, and he doesn't want to go out with some 5 and 12 seasons now and different things like that. He's going to want the offense to turn it around. He's going to want Mac Jones to see what he's got in the kid. And I think you're going to end up finding somebody later on in the season, maybe the second half, that's going to end up emerging and being a waiver wire pickup that can help you win a couple weeks, or at least plug into your flex spot later on in the season once Mac gets a little bit more comfortable with the offense. Now, I'm not saying Mac Jones is going to be the next Tom Brady or anything like that, but I think you'll see more production once he takes over after a couple weeks, just because they're going to want to see what they have in him.
Yeah, I think I side with you there, Josh. On a side note, I've been alive for almost 3 decades, and I don't think I've ever thought of Bill Belichick as a spring chicken. But so
he's definitely not.
Yeah, I love the comparison. I bet that even at fucking 25 years old, Bill was just, in his press conferences, just, we just gotta run the ball harder. We just gotta do a little better there.
We're on to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
You guys happen to catch this? Today, Tom Brady announced that he's an official voice of Subway. Right after Belichick last year started doing Subway commercials. Now Brady's just trying to take everything away from Bill. He took away obviously himself. He took away Gronk. He took away that entire dynasty that Bill had built.
Is Bill married?
I would think so.
I guess I'm just concerned for his wife at this point.
I don't see him on Tinder, swipe right,
well, right,
swipe right, trying to find a partner. So I would assume so.
There was that one draft at home where it was just him and his dog, so I just wasn't sure. But I'm just thinking I'm just thinking ahead to, what's the next thing that Brady's going to take.
Based on those videos from his little draft room, he lives very within his means. He makes like over $10 million a year, and that looked like my 1-bedroom apartment living room.
Yeah, I think that all Bill cares about as a human is to dominate other human souls on the football field, and nothing else matters.
And Tom's like, I'm going to even dominate Subway commercials.
Right.
Just
Tom's like,
dirty.
From the credible source Wikipedia, he's not married. He was divorced in 2006.
Well, that answers that. I guess Brady can't take
with
that
you
away.
What was Wikipedia.
Hey, Wikipedia is a pretty valuable source and a great future sponsor. Wikipedia, I'd love to. I'd love to do some ad reads for you.
I wonder when. Let's see. When did Tom Brady and Giselle get married? Because that would be great if he married Giselle right after Belichick got divorced, just to rub it in one more time.
You check that out quick. While you're doing that, I'm going to start to segue us into our next category, which is sleepers.
I do have one more that we don't have to dive into deep. I'm just going to throw this out as a Josh's crystal ball projection.
Ooh.
And hey. I don't really have any reason other than just a gut feeling right now, but I think Mike Davis is going to bust this year. I think they're going to end up signing somebody else at some point in time, and people are going to draft him in the 6th round, and he's not going to be doing anything for you after like week 7. So
who's out there to sign?
Are
you thinking
of
cuts? Like
back?
No, I'm thinking like cuts after like some of the cuts in July, August. I think they're going to end up bringing somebody in, and it's going to be you drafted him with high hopes of him as a RB3, and you're not going to end up getting anything out of him because it's going to turn into last year when everybody was all right, Ronald Jones, and then all of a sudden you got Lenny Fournette coming in, and you don't know who to play. And I just think with their offense, it's going to be passing offense. You got a offensive-minded head coach coming in, and I think they're going to be down in games and just unleashing Matt Ryan for his last couple years.
I mean, I would agree in terms of for Dynasty, Mike Davis doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Not at all. But redraft-wise, too.
Right now in redraft, he's being drafted at the 30th running back, and I just think that that's fair to take him there.
Yeah, but it's 6th round. You
got to see what else is out there around you, but I don't. Yeah. I think 30th.
Me
running
personally,
back is
I'm
fine in terms of where he's being drafted.
Yeah. No, like I said, I think people are going to be disappointed because I think somebody else is going to come in there and it's going to end up being a committee, and you're not going to know who to play. And yeah,
I think I'm in the same boat. I'm probably just not going to have Mike Davis anywhere. I'm not against it, but. It's just a matter of roster construction, and are you in desperate need of Mike Davis at the moment that you'd have to draft him, or can you survive a round before you take another running back?
Yep.
And usually in my case, I'm probably going to survive a round because I've already done my due diligence at running back ahead of time that I don't have to have Mike Davis. Let's jump into sleepers so we can turn on to the positive page of fantasy football players here. Let's start with Jealous. Who you got as your first sleeper you want to bring up today?
Couple guys that a guy that we've touched on now. This will be like the 4th or 5th time we mention him.
Well, Jell, come on.
Tyler Lockett, man.
Son of a bitch.
He's being drafted right now his ADP right now is at 71. And we already talked about how we would have him ahead of a guy like Chris Godwin, who's being drafted in like the low 30s. Lockett was finished as the wide receiver 9 last year in PPR leagues. He will have some boom bust games, but I think, he's relatively steady Eddie. This was also last year with DK absolutely going off, and he still finished as a top 10 wide receiver. I don't think he may not finish as a top 10 guy again, but he should absolutely be picked at, higher than he's being picked. We talked, like I just said, we talked about Chris Godwin. We also mentioned Kenny Golladay earlier. Right now, Golladay is being picked about 25 picks higher than Lockett. I think that if I had to choose between those two guys, I take Lockett all day. So I'm not saying treat him as a top 10 wide receiver where he finished last year, but he should definitely be drafted higher than he is right now.
Yeah, I think he's being disrespected in drafts right now, like I had mentioned a little bit earlier on in the episode, just because of his inconsistency last year. I think it hurt a lot of people because he went off for a couple of games at the beginning of the season and then disappeared for a chunk of time and then just kind of popped in and out the rest of the season, where I think he's going to be a receiver similar to last year. At the end of the season, you're going to look and he's going to be a top 20 wide receiver, and you're just not going to know what weeks he's going to just absolutely go off on. He's similar to an Amari Cooper, where Amari Cooper does the same thing. He's very inconsistent at times, but at the end of the season, he pops into that top 20, and he's somebody that wins you weeks here and there, and other weeks he doesn't show up at all. But I agree that he is very disrespected right now. There's a lot of guys going in front of him that I'd rather have Tyler Lockett on my team, but he's somebody that like I said, you're going to have weeks where you're going to be like, wow, I shouldn't have played him, but he's where you're drafting him at 2. He's going to be your wide receiver 2 or flex spot.
And the other thing too, I mean, just one thing before you chime in, Rick, what I do really like about the Seattle offense with him, they really like to use him in the red zone on things like bubble screens from inside the 10 and, let him dance a little bit, and he scores on those quite a bit. So you've also got possibly special teams factoring in. I know that you maybe get a touchdown for him throughout the year, on returning, but it's still something. And, he'll have those boom weeks where he'll go, 168, 2 touchdowns, and, he'll get some handoffs on the ground too. So
I think I'm going to disagree with this take. And not in a big way, just a minor way. I'm just looking at his stats from last year, and it was about half of the games in which he had 52 yards or less on the game, and in let's see, it looks like all of those games he had 0 touchdowns. So that means that if you started him every week, half of the weeks you would have been very disappointed, and he might have contributed to you losing. Meanwhile, he has one game with 9 for 103 touchdowns, another game with 15 for 203 touchdowns, and another game with 12 for 90 and 2 touchdowns. That's almost all of his fantasy points out of 3 weeks of the season. He had one other good week with, or 2 other good weeks with about 67 yards and a touchdown, and that's the whole season right there. He only scored in 5 separate games on a 16-week season. I don't want to draft a guy high enough that I'm supposed to start him when I can't rely on him week in and week out to at least give me a shot at decent production. He's, at least based on last year, he's so boom bust that there's no way that I'm going to end up with Tyler Lockett.
He may be a frustrating player to own because he is kind of boom bust like that, but I think like if you can slot him in as a weekly flex play, that's where I would like to have him ideally. Not necessarily as a wide receiver 1 or 2. That's why I said, don't expect top 10 wide receiver numbers like he did last year.
Sure.
But if you can put him in as, maybe a rotational wide receiver 2 or a weekly flex, that's kind of where I would have him.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think I would agree too. If you can do it as a flex when the matchup's right or when you're feeling good about it with Lockett, that's fine to go for it. But yeah, I don't know. It would depend where I'm drafting and where he falls to. But for me personally, it's not a sleeper. Josh, let's move on to you. Who do you got as a sleeper this season?
All right, I have 3 wide receivers and a running back on my list. So for the sake of us, after this next comment, not talking about any more Patriots, I'm just going to get the running back out of the way. And
okay.
I think Damian Harris is a sleeper. Now, a little tidbit of this information, I had put down my sleepers we're recording on Thursday. On Tuesday night, prior to the news coming out of camp yesterday that Damian Harris is heading above their running back 1. But I just really like Damian Harris. For redraft, he's going in the 7th round. Dynasty, he's going in the 10th round, which with that news now, I expect those numbers to bump up. But Cam Newton's going to take away some of those red zone rushes and everything. But once Mac Jones comes in, I think Damian Harris is going to be all systems go. Now, James White is still going to be their passing down running back in the passing work, but I really like Damian Harris. And that offense has shown in the past, granted it was with Tom Brady when it was in their heyday, that Sony Michel can be an RB1. I mean, he ran wild his rookie year. And I don't see why Damian Harris can't have a solid year like that.
I totally agree. I'm as a Dynasty Damian Harris owner, I'm excited about Damian Harris. I'm glad that news came out. And last year, I think his yards per carry was something like
it was
6.
Insane. Yeah,
I think it was 6 yards per carry last year. He clearly has a grasp of how the Patriots want to run on the ground. I hope that they give him a little bit more passing game, just a little bit. I'm not asking for a lot. And then mostly I would really love to see Mac Jones at quarterback so that all the goal line carries can go to him instead. But I totally agree. Joe, what do you think of Damian Harris?
I don't know why you guys just assume that Mac Jones is going to take over for Cam at some point this season.
We didn't.
It's kind of what it sounds like.
I said I
hope. You guys are saying once Mac Jones takes over.
Well, there's reports right now out of camp that it's a 50-50 battle, so that tells me that Cam Newton's he's not doing great to keep his starting job. So.
Okay, but we also were just shitting on him about how he looked in practice and how he's been inaccurate, which leads me to believe, and those are reports coming from beat writers who tend to be homers. That leads me to believe that Cam he's at least going to have that job until he. At some point, maybe it gets turned over to Mac, but if they have any success, there's no reason that they would change over to Mac. I don't think that the Patriots, they did finish the season 7-9 last year. I could see them having, especially in a 17-game season, 9 to 10 wins. I think Vegas has them pegged at 9.5. I would probably take the over on that.
I think that my takeaway here is just that Damian Harris is a good running back. And as long as he gets the opportunity, he will produce with it. So my only question then is how much opportunity can he get?
That's the same question that he faced last year, though.
Right, and as someone who had him, he was startable at times.
Right.
And I'm hopeful with a new quarterback, at least on the team, that at some point maybe things will change where he actually gets all that goal line work. I don't know if it's going to happen, but I hope it does.
And I think he's somebody, too, that if you don't draft him, he's somebody to monitor for a potential trade deadline pickup for your team to help you in the playoff push. Because if you're seeing that offense successful in some ways where Cam Newton is getting some of those goal line touchdowns and running the ball in from inside the 5, and all of a sudden you see Mac Jones take over, well, they're not going to be running those same plays with Mac Jones, so that work is going to go to Damian Harris. So I think that is a player to target down the stretch, because if Damian Harris is doing well with Cam Newton there, getting the yards, just not scoring the touchdowns, he's somebody that you could see a big touchdown tick in the second half of the season if Mac Jones takes over.
So for Dynasty, where would you slot him? And these are guys that right now are being drafted ahead of Harris. Let's say Trey Sermon, Michael Carter, and Chris Carson. I think that's an easy one, at least for me. I would rather have Carson, but let's just stick with those two young guys, Sermon and Carter. Where would you have Harris in Dynasty? Would you have him ahead of those types of guys?
No, I'd have Sermon in front. But right now, I think you had stepped away for a second, Ellis, but Damian Harris in Dynasty is being drafted in the 10th round. So that's a guy that I would like to target in the 10th round of my Dynasty draft if he's available. But I would have him, I would have Carter behind Harris. So I would go Sermon, Harris, Carter.
I guess we just have seen how that New England running back room goes, and I think Harris is the most talented of the guys that they're going to be putting out there, but I don't see how he's going to be getting, even last year, there were weeks where he put up duds, and he never really put up too many spectacular weeks. He had quite a few solid, average, good, like you said, Rick, startable weeks, but he's not going to ever put up a spectacular game. And there's probably going to be games where where he doesn't get too many touches, especially if the Pats are down early. It's going to be the James White show.
Yeah, with that, but Cam Newton had double-digit touchdowns last year, so if he doesn't put up those numbers, where do some of those touchdowns go? I would argue that Harris would get some of those touchdowns.
That's fair.
Dynasty-wise, I generally agree. I would take the rookies first for me, and then Also, as someone who believes in Ramondre Stevenson having a role at some point in time, that decreases Damian Harris's dynasty value a little bit for me. I have both of them on my dynasty team, so I don't care who wins. But we'll see as time goes on. But let's move on to another sleeper here. I want to touch on one that I know Josh is a fan of as well. Maybe jealous too. We'll see. That would be Mr. Gerald Everett out there in Seattle.
I am.
That was the spoiler, folks.
Yeah. Fresh out of Los Angeles, traveling with his former offensive coordinator to Seattle, where he apparently is now the most knowledgeable player on the team of what the offense is. So that's fun. He's always been a very, athletic pass-catching style tight end, but he played for a team that had two pretty good ones and didn't target either of them very much. And now he's going to a team where he's kind of the lone guy as far as being the tight end one. He's got a great quarterback throwing him the ball. A team that their defense is, average at best. They're going to be throwing the ball a decent amount, in part because they play in the toughest division in the league, in the NFC West. There's just a lot of reason to believe that Gerald Everett can take that step forward, given that he'll have more opportunity this year than he's ever had before, traveling with his coach who believes in him as a player. I just think that his value is insane right now, given how low he's going. If you can make him your tight end 2, that's incredible. And if you are someone who likes to wait a long time on tight ends, then he can be your tight end 1 and get another similar guy to pair up with him. And I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I'm just reading something that Pete Carroll said mid last week, that Gerald Everett will, quote, be a real threat in the throwing game this season. Fanciest, sweetest looking wide receiver / tight end mix that we've had. So Pete Carroll is loving him. This is, Russell Wilson, when he got Jimmy Graham, when he got Greg Olsen, they both are washed up. I think Gerald Everett is hopefully going to just now hit his stride. I struggled really mightily. So we had our dynasty draft, what was that? Probably a month and a half ago. And I really, really struggled letting go of him so I could make room for my rookies. He was somebody that I picked him up early on in the offseason for the exact same reason that we're talking about. He's very athletic. He's going to get a lot of balls. If you can get him as your depth tight end, that is a huge win.
Yeah, no, I agree with that completely. I'm all in on Gerald Everett, especially for his draft capital right now, how late you can get him in redrafts. And, even in Dynasty, he's probably just way at the bottom. You can probably, both formats, pick him up off waiver wires if you really wanted to, but you're going to be one of those smart people listening to the show that drafts him later on in your draft. But no, Russell Wilson, he loves looking at tight ends in the red zone. Look at 2 years ago with Will Dissly. He was just having a phenomenal season until was it meniscus or Achilles?
And that's Dissly, who was, I believe, undrafted, and he was mostly known as a blocking tight end. And he got a lot of receptions, got a lot of touchdowns. Russell likes to use his tight ends.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. That's why I'm all for it. Gerald Everett is a much more athletic tight end than Will Dissly is. And yeah, I think the sky's the limit for him this year. I think he's going to be a sneaky tight end to target at the back half of your drafts, and it's definitely a sleeper right now.
I want to quick bring up some breaking news. Not that it's super fantasy relevant, but more of a holy shit moment. As I was just looking at something. Draft pick for the Seattle Seahawks, Tamarian Terry, was indicted for felony murder of a 21-year-old woman in a 2018 gang-related mass shooting in Georgia. So if you're in a deep dynasty and you still have him on your team, it's time to drop him. And
if you have him, well, the Seahawks did cut him on Wednesday.
Okay,
so
all right, good.
If you still have him rostered, then there's no reason for any other NFL team to pick him up, because he's going to be in prison for a long time. I think it was like eight different people were charged, because it was that big of, for some reason, I don't know the details of it. Obviously, I'm not in any sort of gang like that, but
oh no,
not. I got too much Wisconsin in me for that.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, if you have, for any reason, if you had him before, just don't waste your time.
Stop it. Yep. This is a worse version of the Antonio Brown, Cole Beasley take from last week. This is a lot
yes.
worse than both of those. Okay, let's move on. Let's jump. Let's switch back to sleepers who are on the rise. I would like to bring up Mr. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and it's hard to call sleeper status on a guy who's going in like the second or third round. But what my argument is here, and this was very apparent to me during the Super Bowl, because the Chiefs could not really do anything against the Bucs, and there were two reasons for that. One, Patrick Mahomes had no time because their offensive line was terrible. And two, they didn't even try to run the ball. They had so few carries during that game. It was clear to Tampa Bay immediately that they weren't even going to bother trying to establish a run game. And one of those two problems has already been fixed in the sense that the Chiefs have revamped their O-line. It's much better both for protecting Mahomes, also for the run game.
5 completely new guys.
Yeah. It's a better group of guys. And two, they learned, or at least I would hope that they learned in the Super Bowl last year, that they cannot win without establishing any kind of run game. They can't just rely on Patrick Mahomes to do everything. And I think that was the kick in the ass that the Chiefs needed, that Andy Reid needed, to say, okay, I guess we have to use the run game to, balance our offense a little more, make the defense guess a little more often. And I think the result of that is going to be that Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets more carries, more valuable touches, red zone touches, places where other teams aren't typically expecting the Chiefs to run the ball. Edwards-Helaire is a great talent. We all thought last year coming in that he was, potentially the top running back of the group, at least as far as landing spot and what his future potential was. And this year he's devalued a little bit because he had a slightly down season. He didn't have as many touchdowns as you would hope from a rookie running back who's the starter. I think that the Chiefs just kind of adjust their offense a little bit this year, and Edwards-Helaire is a big winner of that adjustment. That's just my take. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I would agree completely with your take. I'm going to keep it short on my end because I have him in my keeper league. I kept him because I am all in on him. I agree with every point that you made. And the other thing that I want to add is even if they are in the passing game, he's somebody that's out there for 3 downs. He can catch the ball and is a great receiver out of the backfield. And we saw that at times last year too. So I think, like you had mentioned in the Super Bowl, they realized that they can't just rely on Patrick Mahomes. They need to have a good run game to open up the pass game even more for Patrick Mahomes. Mahomes has all the talent in the world to make any throw on the field that you can imagine. But they realize that in order to protect him as well, they need to revamp that line. And like you had said, it's going to open up the running game, getting some good runs in there too with some beefing up the line.
One thing just additional to consider that's going to work in Clyde's favor, and not that Damian Williams played a huge role in that Chiefs offense, but he's now a Bear. So it's just one less back to, have to fight for playing time. Again, not that Williams was playing a huge role, but it's something. I think the hope when Edwards-Helaire was drafted was that he would for Andy Reid, he would become the new version of Brian Westbrook, which is what Reid had in Philly, obviously. So if Clyde can get it together, and if they can feed him the ball, they can use him the right way in that kind of Brian Westbrook type of a role. He's gonna be a boss. And again, he did have his down weeks last year, but he was a rookie. He's going into his second year. He's got one more year in that system. I think that this could be, he could have a real big year coming out.
Do you guys see Jerick McKinnon scaring him at all in the backfield? New addition.
Not particularly.
I think the biggest thing that's hurt any of the Chiefs running backs the last couple of years is their midseason additions. You had Lev Bell coming in last year who was just completely washed up and shouldn't have even been out there. And then why am I blanking? Who was there the year before that came in again that was all washed up?
Yeah, you're right.
I'm thinking LaShawn McCoy.
LaShawn McCoy. Yeah, no, that's 100%. Yep, LaShawn McCoy.
So
they keep bringing in these garbage guys mid-season to take away some of the running back work, and it's just stupid. Just stick with Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Andy Reid.
I mean, LaShawn McCoy knows where to go for those rings. If he is chasing, he's got 2.
Yeah, he's doing it right.
Yeah.
Have a good statistical career and then go get the rings at the end and hope you get to the Hall of Fame. Let's move on to another sleeper here. Jell, who you got as the second sleeper?
I got another running back that's going to be, he's a top 20 back. And I think he should be higher. He's kind of being drafted right now in that, in the mid-teens amongst the running backs. And especially for Dynasty, I'm loving Joe Mixon. Right now, like I said, right now he's going as the 16th drafted back right after Clyde. And I really see, something that goes unnoticed with Mixon. He's still only 24 years old. Feels like he's been in the league forever. He's still only 24. So he's got another, hopefully 5 or so years of sweet, RB1, RB2 type of production in him. The other thing that they said that came out the other day directly from one of their offensive coaches is that this is probably going to be the biggest workload that Mixon has in his entire year, or in his entire career. This year will be his largest workload. Obviously, that's awesome news, and I'm sure that part of that is because Burrow's coming off that knee. So they're going to want to feed the backs, help protect Burrow till that offensive line gets a little bit more built up, till Burrow gets better at, being able to feel out defensive lines, feeling out the pocket. So I think they're gonna feed Mixon, and the return of Burrow's great. The addition of Chase is great. Just one additional weapon that defensive coordinators have to prep for. I guess the only issue potentially that I have with him is his ability, or lack thereof, of staying healthy. But when he's on the field, he always puts up sweet numbers, and he's not as much of a guaranteed injury, I don't think, as, some of the guys we mentioned before, Will Fuller, etc. But right now he's going as that 16th running back. I have him ahead of guys, one name is just Antonio Gibson. I like Mixon over Gibson, but that everybody doesn't feel that way, but that's where I sit on Mixon.
Josh, how you feeling?
I like Joe Mixon. I think you touched on it. Is he going to stay healthy? I mean, that he struggled last year. I think he played one game and kept teasing that he was going to be back. He was going to be back, and let a bunch of managers down, and he never ended up coming back onto the field. I mean, depth-wise, all you have behind him is Chris Evans, Captain America. So, I mean, Joe Mixon's going to be out there and getting a huge workload. You got Joe Burrow learning the offense his second year in. He's coming off of an injury, but I think you're going to see him step up more after he learns the offense. But I like Joe Mixon. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Al. Just where he's being drafted, he's definitely somebody you can grab in the late second, early third round that could have potential to be a top 7, top 5 running back for you this year.
I totally agree with you, Jealous, on every point here. I love Joe Mixon this year. I think he's a perfectly fine pick in Dynasty. Right now, I think he's undervalued because he's always hurt, and everyone knows that he's always hurt. So if he can survive without getting hurt anymore, because technically players aren't supposed to be injury prone, according to doctors. They say that that's not a thing. Injury prone is not real. And I'd love to believe
news.
That's yeah, it seems like it's pretty real with some of these guys, Will Fuller. But yeah, I'm very hopeful that he can put together a whole healthy season, and I totally agree with everything about that. That being the case, let's move on. Josh, hit me with a sleeper.
We're going to throw another guy that's been very injury prone his entire career, but I have my fingers crossed he's going to stay healthy this year. He had a monster rookie season catching 11 touchdown passes. Currently, he's being drafted and redrafted in the middle of the 11th round, and in Dynasty, the back end back into the 8th round, beginning to the 9th round, and that's wide receiver Mike Williams of this Los Angeles Chargers. Right. So I absolutely love Mike Williams, just a monster target. Herbert's coming off of a monster year. I see big things for that offense, and I think he's going to step into that wide receiver 2 role and could potentially, I mean, Keenan Allen's a great wide receiver, so not knocking him at all, but I think you're going to start to see him start climbing a little bit towards Keenan Allen numbers as well. Not overpassing Keenan Allen this year, but I think you're going to see that climb as long as he can stay healthy. But where he's going in drafts right now, I'm all in on taking that chance on him, because he could end up being somebody that you could end up being your wide receiver 2 or somebody you can put into your flex spot every week.
Yeah, I mean, Keenan Allen's 29, and he's, hasn't dealt with as many injuries these past couple years that he did earlier in his career, and Keenan's still an absolute monster. But the thing I have with Mike Williams, I feel like we've all been waiting for him to have his breakout year, and for some reason it just hasn't happened. I mean, coming out of Clemson, he looked like a no-brainer, gonna be an absolute stud. For some reason, he doesn't seem to put up completely studly numbers. I hope this is hopefully the year that he can be, have that breakout year, and this is his 4th or 5th year in the league, so it's about time if it's gonna happen. But he's also got Justin Herbert, the best QB he's had in his career based on the way that Herbert looked last year. I mean, he had Phillip Rivers, who put up a nice career, but he had him at the end of Rivers' career. I agree. I think there's a lot of hope for Williams to have a breakout year. I've just been waiting for it to happen for the last 2 or 3, and it hasn't. So that's my only hesitation, but I know the potential's there, the skill set's there, the size is there. So I think as long as it's got to happen, and now there's no better time than now for that breakout season to happen.
And I think it just, like we touched on, it's health. Can he stay healthy and on the field? Because when he's on the field, he's productive, right, but he's just had a hard time staying healthy.
2 things I want to add here. First, I agree with both of you in your separate takes in that he's lined up for an improved season and is certainly a sleeper. Health is the problem. Joe Lombardi, the new offensive coordinator for the Chargers, believes this will be a big season for Mike Williams because of the style of offense that he's bringing over from New Orleans. He thinks that Mike Williams fits in perfectly with that and is going to end up having a big season because of it. I certainly agree with that, and also as someone who actually watched all of the Chargers games last year, Mike Williams very legally watched all of the games of the Chargers last year. Mike Williams, it was he has it. He's got it on the field when they throw to him. He is absolutely dominant at contested catches. That's part of why he gets hurt a lot, is because he goes up and then he forgets that he has legs, and then he doesn't land on those legs. Hopefully this new offense that Joe Lombardi is going to install will have him doing less leaping 50 yards downfield and landing on his back, and more, catching and then running with the ball a little bit more often to keep him healthy and give him a whole ton of production, because he is a good-ass receiver who cannot stay on the field. I think that this year he has a good shot to put it together for most of a season and give you some good numbers in return.
Well, if Lombardi's going to be running the same system that he did in New Orleans, we saw what Michael Thomas did 2 years ago.
Yeah.
If he puts Mike Williams in that Michael Thomas type role where he's going to get, he'll have, Michael Thomas was having weeks where he was getting 15 catches, multiple weeks in that season,
yep.
15 catches, a couple touchdowns, and getting over that century mark on a nearly weekly basis. So if he plays that type of role, I think Mike Williams does have the talent. Like I said, it's just a matter of him staying on the field, getting the opportunity, and being used in a more appropriate way.
Yeah, yep. Totally agree. Let's jump into another sleeper here. I want to bring up Cooper Kupp. I had personally kind of forgotten about Cooper Kupp for a little while because I didn't have him last season. looking back at the stats, certainly last year was a down year, and that's why I'm putting him in the sleeper category. Doing a little research, it sounds like he had knee bursitis all last season that he was dealing with. Not only that, he was dealing with Jared Goff. Thanks. He was dealing with knee problems and quarterback problems, and now both of those are fixed going into this season with Matt Stafford and healthy knees. If we look at, the years when Cooper Kupp was healthy and playing in a functional passing offense, he was pretty dominant in terms of getting lots of catches, lots of touchdowns. He just knows how to get open. He might not be your, deep down the field threat, but that doesn't really matter if you catch 10 touchdowns a year and you get plenty of catches along the way to give you, your 100-yard games along the way. I think that we're going to return to Cooper Kupp dominance this year. And in those years where he's been really good, during the healthy stretches, he's like the wide receiver 5 at those times for many weeks on end, and then he gets hurt, and then he falls down the ranks again. So if he can just string together a healthy season with Matt Stafford, he's definitely being underdrafted right now if he can do that. So that's my thought there. You guys got any disagreements there?
No, I agree with that. I mean, Cooper Kupp, where he's being drafted right now, he is kind of forgotten, and he's somebody that puts up solid, consistent numbers every year. You got Stafford in there, which is an upgrade over Jared Goff as long as Stafford can stay on the field. I agree. I think Cooper Kupp is poised to go back to his old form again this year.
So this brings me to the question that I always have, that I'm sure many fantasy owners have, and it's his teammate Robert Woods. Every
Bob
single
Trees.
damn year. It's like they're paired right next to each other, and it's the same this year in both redraft and in Dynasty, particularly in Dynasty. I've always been more of a Cooper Kupp fan than Robert Woods, but I know, Rick, you've had your hard-ons for Woods before. So where do you sit between Kupp and Bobby?
Well, certainly in Dynasty is Cooper Kupp, and in redraft this year it's still Cooper Kupp. I definitely like both of them, and Robert Woods is quietly one of the most consistent receivers out there that you can have on a fantasy team, because year after year he just churns out 1,000+ yards and, I don't know, 6 touchdowns on average or something like that. It's very consistent and easygoing with Robert Woods. Cooper Kupp is the guy that when he's on the field, he has a chance to actually be dominant, which is not really Robert Woods' game. For that reason, both redraft and Dynasty, I would take Cooper Kupp this season.
Yeah, Robert Woods is always somebody, too, that, like you had mentioned with Cooper Kupp, you just kind of forget about every year, and he quietly puts up those wide receiver 2 numbers every year. And like you had touched on, Ellis, they always seem to be right around the same part in the draft, where historically I've just been too scared to plant my flag with one, and I pivot to somebody else because I don't want to make the wrong choice there. But no, I agree with Eric's take on that. I like Cooper Kupp in both redraft and Dynasty for this year with Stafford there.
Yep, I'm in the same boat.
Awesome. Any other sleepers you fellas want to bring up before we wrap up today?
You got any, Gel? I got a couple more.
There's just one guy that I want to go over real quick, and it's solely because he's gonna be the main dude in Detroit, and that's Amon-Ra St. Brown. He really has no other competition here.
Quintez.
He's got Quintez Cephas. That's it. And then obviously
good
Hawk,
old syphilis.
But syphilis testing. He's got. I mean, it's Hawk and Cephas, and then it's St. Brown. I mean, unless they're going to be whipping the ball around to Jamal Williams out wide.
Tyrell Williams?
Very possible. Swift is probably going to get more receptions this year than last year, but still, St. Brown's going to fall into that one of those starting wide receiver roles. There's just nobody else left on that team. So I just wanted to touch on him real quick. He's being drafted right now as the 61st wide receiver. That's, I mean, I would have him plenty higher than that.
Just for awareness' sake, the other two contending wide receivers are Tyrell Williams and Brashad Perriman. I definitely value Amon-Ra St. Brown over both of them.
Absolutely.
in Dynasty, it's really, really not close. And in redraft, I would still take Amon-Ra over both of them anyway. Josh, do you have any take differing on this?
No, I'm spot on with that. You guys can have whoever wants Tyrell and
let anybody else take those guys.
Let someone else do it.
Nope.
Yeah,
I'm done.
Absolutely. Especially for dynasty purposes too. I think he's going to be a stud. And yeah, you might be disappointed with him this year, but it's just going to be the Lions in general you're going to be disappointed with. So it's not going to.
You might not get. Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that St. Brown's going to lead to wins for the Lions.
No, yeah,
but they could help the fantasy team win.
yeah, and give it a year or two. Whenever this Lions rebuild hits a new quarterback, things could go even better for Amon-Ra because he is the one guy who's still going to be there for sure when that time comes. Let's move on. Josh, you had another one ready to go.
Yeah, so this guy, wide receiver, is currently being drafted in the middle of your 14th round in redraft leagues. Really loved the reports coming out of camp this week that Emmanuel Sanders is looking good to be the wide receiver 2 because that is going to push Gabriel Davis down even further in your drafts to go and get. I really like Gabriel Davis this year to take a step up and move into that wide receiver 2 role, beat out Emmanuel Sanders. Quietly last year in his rookie season, he had 35 catches for just under 600 yards and 7 touchdowns. Touchdowns probably are going to stay around the same, but I think yardage-wise is going to go up. You saw the Buffalo Bills offense last year take a huge step up with Josh Allen, and I just like Gabriel Davis this year. He's a big target. They targeted him in the red zone when they got close and made some big plays, and I think he'll be somebody that you could take a little flyer on at the end of your draft.
I don't have too much to say beyond that. I mean, Emmanuel Sanders does always seem to be
screwing everyone else.
Yeah. Like wherever he goes, he's just kind of a little pest. He's like a little bug that just gets in the way. But I think Gabriel Davis, being just given that he's that much younger, given that Sanders is getting up, a lot more up there in age, I could see. I mean, beyond what I don't really have much beyond what you said there, Josh.
As someone who, in a Dynasty League, picked up and held on to Gabe Davis last season, I was very pumped about that pickup and excited going into the season. Now, the sad reality there is that after our rookie draft, I had to drop Gabe Davis because I have a deep wide receiver core, and I didn't have a choice, and Josh picked him up.
Sure
instead.
Did.
So I'm fully on board with your take on Gabe Davis. I decided to keep a player like De'Ami Brown or something instead, hoping for the home run rather than the safe double that is Gabe Davis. I love that pick. Any other sleepers you fellas want to bring up?
I do have one more. If anybody else has one, I'll let you jump in front since I just had one. But
go for it.
Have one? All right. This is another guy going in the 14th round that I personally got to watch a lot of last year, being a diehard Bears fan that
Darnell Mooney.
Darnell Mooney. That is
it.
the guy that I'm going to talk about because I fully expect him. He was pretty much their wide receiver too last year. He looked phenomenal at times with kissing titties as the quarterback throwing him the ball. And Andy Dalton, I think, has a lot better accuracy than Mitch Trubisky. I expect Justin Fields to have a lot better accuracy. And I can't tell you how many times watching games last year, I'd see Mitch Trubisky drop back in the pocket, looking deep, chucks the ball 40, 50 yards down the field. You see Darnell Mooney beating his defender by 10 yards, and the ball goes 30 yards past Darnell Mooney. So if they can hit him in stride, I expect huge things. I think he can be somebody that spreads the field, could catch the deep balls, give you that 80-yard touchdown pass, 60-yard touchdown, reception, catching the 60-yard touchdown pass.
Right.
But I fully expect him to take a step up this year. And he's somebody, like I said, in redraft, you can get him late in your draft, take a flyer on him as well. And I think regardless of the quarterback, he should have a little bit of an uptick in his production from last year.
Yeah, I totally agree. Jell, you got any thoughts there?
I just know that it's going to be, Allen Robinson's going to obviously be that wide receiver one.
100%.
No question. But Mooney showed that he deserves that second wide receiver role, and he'll get it. I mean, he showed plenty of flash last year, especially later in the year, that once he was able to get the ball in his hands from, the few times that it happened with Mitch, that he's, can be a special player. So I'm on board with that, especially that late in your drafts. Don't go nuts and draft him in, in the first 10 rounds, but if you can get him in, somewhere later than that, I'm all on board with that.
Absolutely. In that case, let's wrap it up here. You guys got any plugs before we put the show to bed?
No, just that follow us, subscribe. Typically our episodes are coming out Tuesday, so you can expect to see that continuing. Might ramp it up a little bit once the season starts, but make sure you subscribe. It'll give you that notification so you can listen to us in your ear holes. And
I'm glad that Josh he clarified what you meant by plugs. I wasn't sure if you meant like plugs for drugs, plugs for prostitutes, anything else that you pay for. Thought that's maybe where you were going with that, but I guess I'll leave that alone, and I'll keep that to myself. Rick, how many of those drinks did you pound through? Like 4 or 5 or so, you think?
Well, I don't know how much.
I saw you eating the berries out of the glass.
Yeah, the berries taste like rum, and I don't know how much rum I poured in the glass because the berries kind of disguise how much. But it was definitely at least 3 shots worth is in the glass, maybe more. I'm not sure. I'm kind of lit right now. I'll be honest.
At a baby.
I hope you are drinking that same thing next week.
Probably will be.
One plug I do need to get in there. Instagram, Twitter, like I said earlier, at Dead Arm Sports, hashtag DAS. Hit up those DMs. We'll get back to you. And just make sure, subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, Absolutely. Whatever you listen to. So just need to get that in there as well.
And one more plug I'm going to say, too, is if you're listening, you have a question about your team or Dynasty team, redraft, if your draft's coming up, you have any questions for us, shoot us a DM on any of our socials, and we're more than happy. We'll look at that and could even answer it on one of our podcasts for you. So don't be afraid to send us any questions you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And see, this is why I paused for plugs, because we had some.
Plug it in, plug it in.
We are definitely happy to fill your ear holes. And yeah, if you have questions, feel free to just text me, if you have my number, because
it's 8675309.
At this point in time, most of our listeners have my phone number. So feel free to just drop me a text message if you'd like to submit a question that way as well. Thanks for joining us. We'll catch you next week. We're gonna next week we'll be diving into what we consider to be our Dynasty fantasy dream teams, where we kind of match up ADP with who we would love to have at every one of those spots in a draft, to just sort of talk about what that ideal strategy falls for each of us individually and the players we like. So it should be a fun one. We will catch you on the next one.
One final plug. Happy wedding week, Rick. Happy wedding week.
Oh, thank you.
We'll all be there. It's going to be a damn joy.
Yeah, the next episode you hear, I will have a ring on my finger at that time. So woot woot. Yeah.
Congrats, man. All right.
Thanks for joining us, y'all. We'll catch you on the next one.